Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support this channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. Today I am returning to the Bible study series Heroes of Faith, where I'm looking at Hebrews 11 and going through the text and taking a closer look at the people the writer of Hebrews says are great examples of faith and asking the question, why do they think so? Today we are looking at Rahab the Harlot, who is mentioned by the writer of Hebrews in chapter 11, verse 31. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Now, the full story of Rahab the Harlot is found in Joshua, in particular chapter 2. There is a mention of her after the conquest of Jericho in Joshua 6, 22 through 25. And more notably in the New Testament as one of the few women mentioned in the lineage of Jesus by Matthew as part of Jesus' lineages. But James also mentions Rahab the harlot as an example of faith and works going together, where he says in James 2:25, in the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off to a different direction. The short version of Joshua 2 is that Joshua sends some men to spy out Jericho, and they find themselves in Rahab's home, asking for protection. And Rahab covers for them by hiding them in the roof thatch and also lying about the fact that they had already left the city to the city guard. When the deception works, she asks the spies to spare her and her family, and when they conquer the city, they agree and she lets them out the window as she lives in the walls of the city. They ask her to tie a scarlet cord in the window so the Israelites will know who to spare. In the end, she is spared and becomes part of the Israelites, and in the end, also Jesus' lineage. But why is she a hero of faith to the writer of Hebrews? His own words are that she welcomed the spies, and that is why she was spared. Given at the end of the chapter sums up the idea that the people the writer of Hebrews puts into this category of heroes of faith are a list of people who were looking for a promise that would be received later. Rahab is definitely an example of that, but not a promise made by God. In fact, it could be argued that the spies disobeyed God by creating a situation where someone who was to be killed based on God's decree at the beginning of the conquest is now spared. But to the writer of Hebrews, she is someone who received a promise and acted on it in faith, only receiving a reward when everything was over. The idea of looking for something in the future, a promise in the future, is very much present here. And the idea of acting without having received the result is very much in the writer of Hebrews' mind when he includes Rahab the harlot. I find it much more interesting who she was and how awkward over the years it has made Sunday school teachers' jobs when talking about this story. I mean, harlot is an archaic word to us, but back in the day, the translators used it to describe accurately what is being used here in the Hebrew, which makes her a prostitute who enjoyed the work. It is also interesting that she has to bear false witness and lie to the guards of the city, which is a legal act back then. Now imagine you're a Sunday school teacher who is talking about this story in class. When little Johnny asks what a harlot is and points out that Rabyd lied and it was had a good result for her, what do you say? The truth won't do. Well, honey, she's a woman who sold herself for sex and enjoyed the work. That's why we call her a harlot. And yes, she did lie, but she lied for God's people, so that's okay. Now the lying harlot forces the Sunday school teacher to avoid the question by being a liar herself about the answer. I mean, you could, shelter the kid from the truth. Well, honey, she was a woman who was very popular with people of the city, particularly men. And at that point, just drop the whole issue of the fact that she lied. The problem I've always had with Rahab is that faith in God might have been the furthest thing from her mind. It seems to me it was more about self-preservation, and she plainly says so. That she feared the Israelites would conquer the city is evident, and she was hedging her bets. If they fail, no one knows, and she helped the spies, as her cover-up as a prostitute would be perfect. Of course these men came to her, for the same reason that all men come to her. But if Jericho is destroyed, then she lives, and F the rest of the people in the city as long as I am spared. This isn't faith so much as her being who she was, a prostitute looking for an angle that helped her the most. Nothing wrong with it, just a more real way to look at the character's mental state. The fact that the writer of Matthew puts her in the lineage of Jesus is also interesting, given that Mary had a very similar situation for herself, being accused of something similar. that she was going to be an immoral woman because she had sex outside of marriage, and that resulted in a pregnancy. Now, there are a couple of things that do need to be said at this point about Joshua. I haven't really covered Joshua on this channel, but the most notable thing is that the story is mythological and legendary as anything else in Joshua is. Real historians and archaeologists will tell you that there's no evidence for Jericho ever being a city like the one described in the Bible. And the conquest of Canaan also has no evidence for at the time, as Egypt would have actually ruled the land at this time period based on the archaeology and scholarship. What we have here is later writers who are writing and editing the text of the Old Testament not knowing any of this and going on the legends and stories of their people, not facts. The name Rahab is also interesting. It's another name for Egypt, and I have to wonder if the writers were not taking another dig at Egypt, given who their captors were at the time, Babylon, Persia, etc., rivals of Egypt. Rahab also means, as a name, proud or arrogant, so the theme also seems to be a proud, arrogant Egypt. The prostitute is humbled and submits to the land of Israel. Yeah, that's a lot of shade being thrown at Egypt. Just putting that in there. I personally have always had problems with the story of Rahab. Not that currently I have any objection to prostitution. As a libertarian, I kind of can see the advantages of legalizing prostitution. It's also kind of would get rid of the hypocrisy that exists in my society, where if you have sex for money and put it on camera, that's okay because it's porn. But if you do it privately, somehow it's a crime. It seems to be kind of a strange crime anyway, and Christians actually have had different views about prostitutions over the year. I do believe it was St. Augustine who said it should be allowed because that way men would have an outlet and they wouldn't become gay. Kind of a weird reason, but there it is. But this story, on a practical note, has always just been a bugaboo for anybody who wants to preach about the story or anybody who wants to teach the story in Sunday school, especially to little kids. It's why in indoctrination there are certain stories of the Bible that you kind of skipped over. It's weird, though, how the conquest of Jericho with the city walls falling down is very much a part of many people's Sunday school experiences. You can even look up online little kids singing the song, the walls come tumbling down and falling to the ground, and even doing little plays about it. Notice that they never talk about the genocide that happened afterwards, nor do they talk about Rahab the harlot, entertaining the spies. It's always an awkward conversation with little Johnny to talk about what Rahab did for a living. But it seems to be this kind of awkward nature that seems to be a part of most religious teaching, especially when they teach on this topic, of avoiding this subject of prostitution, or avoiding the fact that Rahab straight up lies here. She tells the guards that they left by the city some of the way. If you can go get them, catch them. And then she sends the spies out a different direction. So it's like, okay, whatever. But yeah, it's one of those things that just is really awkward for Christian teachers to deal with. And so in the context of Christian education, I remember, putting the story of Rahab the harlot to like a middle school level or later. The conquest of Jericho was always too fun and too popular to not include, say, in a primary class of first through third graders singing the song and the walls come tumbling down. Was just too much of a draw for a lot of people's memories to not put in the story. So, but we'd leave out the genocide part and the Rahab part until later when they got older. It's always seemingly interesting how Christians want to edit their own book in order to make it more palatable, to not deal with the realities of what these people were. Rahab the harlot and how she is treated is a good example, even by biblical writers. I mean, look at how James treats her. Was not even Rahab the harlot considered righteous? In other words, he's throwing a lot of shade on how unrighteous she was. Like, this is a woman who was a harlot. She was a prostitute. She enjoyed the work. It's like she was a promiscuous harlot that enjoyed everything she was doing, and even God considers her righteous because she sent the spies a different direction and lied to the city guard. It's kind of interesting that he has to almost acknowledge it passively, like with a little bit of disdain as well, in order to put her in his book and as a proof of works and faith working together. So I've always found Rahab the harlot an interesting character in the fiction. She has a perfect cover, because if the men come to her, well, yeah, sure, men are going to Rahab the harlot. A lot of men go to Rahab the harlot, so there's nothing unusual about that. It's interesting that even when God has to do espionage, he ends up being in places that are not exactly savory or are considered of ill repute in order to do that espionage, and has to resort to lies and deception just like everybody else. It seems strange that an omniscient God would have to send spies anyway. Why doesn't he just reveal to Joshua what the weaknesses of the city are and what's going on? But he can't do that. He's got to send spies instead. And they do the same things that spies have always done. Goes to places of ill repute, get information, do the things that need to be done, hang out with the people in low places in order to get the real scoop of what's going on. And that's what they have to do. But I'm always interested in what you have to say about these stories. What do you think about Rahab the harlot? And do you think that it's interesting that she's considered a hero of faith because she looked for a promise, or was she just being pragmatic and trying to save her skin? I think it's more the latter when you really look at the story. Do you think that maybe the writers are throwing a little shade at Egypt by calling her Rahab? Might be. But as always, I'll be interested in what you have to say in your comments. These are my thoughts about it. So make sure you put your own comments in the comments section so I can read them later. I'm always very interested in what happens in deconversion Bible studies. I guess the deconversion note is you do really look at this story differently when you no longer believe, don't you? You really do. The Bible is a very interesting book of mythology once you get past the fact that it's mythology. So thanks for all of your time. There's many ways to support this channel. Our mission is to normalize atheism and deconversion. So to that end, your financial support always helps me do my work with a little more ease of mind. And so you can super chat, super thanks me. My PayPal link is in the description as well. There's also, the age-old, just like and share the videos because that gets me more notice, so that's always appreciated. But the best way to support this channel is through membership. And by becoming a member, you become a part of the Rabyd Nation and subject to all the rights and privileges thereof and some of the responsibilities. But my members allow me that monthly support that just helps me enjoy my work a little bit more and lets me know that people are interested in what I do. And that's always good for me. So thank you very much for those that support this channel and support the work that we do. Appreciate it all. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. So make sure you're taking all your time, money, and energy and spending that on yourself, the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. And don't waste it on the trappings of religion and faith. That's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.